Welcome in everyone to another live episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin, riding solo for this one, but DK is here in the background, help keeping me straight. But we got a guest also coming up later on in the episode, and actually here shortly, DraftPlex, DraftPlex own Jason Pruett will be joining us, and I cannot wait to dive into this draft. Of course, the Ravens may value the draft more than any team in the league. Certainly, their ability to acquire picks, I think, is safe to say that they value those picks more than any team in the league. So, can't wait to get to his take on this draft and start to kind of piece things together as we have a long off season, folks. But it goes kind of quick. Yeah, Jax, I am too. And before we get into the draft talk, I guess before we get into the episode, I got to shout out today's sponsor. But then I am going to talk some more of the general news going around the NFL right now, including what Jax just brought up in the chat, but before switching and going all in on the draft. But before we do, got to shout out today's sponsor, and that is BetOnline, who continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA, college basketball, NHL, and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, spreads, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And I tell you, I'll certainly be over on betonline.ag checking things out when it comes to some of these props surrounding the draft, because I tell you, I don't know if you find much more. It's like that, of course, March Madness, super unpredictable, but being good at predicting what happens in the NFL draft is really tough to do. And that's why I feel thankful that DraftPlex is going to be joining us, because you won't find much more accurate draft predictions from anyone. I don't care what network they might be on, how many followers they might have. You're probably not going to find much more accuracy than what Jason's going to provide from DraftPlex. So super thankful to have him coming on here and excited to hear from him. But before we go any further here, we do have to talk about some of the reports coming around. Man, some good, some exciting, some interesting, and then some getting a little bit scary. It seemed all but kind of a foregone conclusion that the Ravens would ultimately bring back Ronnie Stanley. All the reports coming out from both sides that Ronnie wants to make a deal with the Ravens, wants to continue his career as with the team that drafted him, and that the Ravens felt the exact same way. We're extremely happy with his performance. He's shown in the past to be flexible with his contract after the Ravens signed him to a massive extension, only to see him get injured in the same week, and then finally return to form in just very recent history last year, proving that he could get through a season healthy. And also return back to that Pro Bowl status and form that we're used to seeing from Ronnie Stanley. He did just that. And all the reports were saying, look, his agent, same agent as Saquon Barkley, now that deal's locked up and done, now that agent can then turn their attention towards some of their other clients. And I don't know if how many more are going to be much bigger as far as contract value than Ronnie Stanley's expected to get, being as though he plays the left tackle position. But that was the plan. They were either going to get him signed to a deal, maybe even as soon as the end of this week. But did not see this coming. Apparently, the New England Patriots are making a strong push to try and acquire the talents of Ronnie Stanley, and they say the reports are that he is their number one target in free agency. Not what I want to hear. Now, look, I mean, I think there's some loyalty that Ronnie Stanley seems to have towards the Ravens for all that they've done for him in his career. But money talks, right? And if you're telling me that the primary focus in free agency from the New England Patriots is Ronnie Stanley, I know they got some money to spend. They got a young quarterback. They don't have a ton of big contracts on their team. So, yeah, they're going to be trying to get him. And then also, not to be outdone, the Chiefs are very much so eager to try and land Ronnie Stanley as well. So Yeah, apparently the Chiefs are expected to target Ronnie Stanley if and when he hits free agency. Let's hope that he does not hit and reach free agency. Let's hope that a deal is done. I will say that one scares me more, the Chiefs thing, than New England. Reason being, Ronnie's not the youngest guy. He's not an old man either, but he's not the youngest guy. He's not starting his career. If anything, he's certainly on the back half. And I think he's looking to go, if he were to leave, which I don't think he's looking to, but if he were, I doubt he's going to a rebuild. I doubt he's going to a team that still doesn't. I mean, they got a first-year head coach in Mike Vrabel, not his first time coaching, but still first year in New England, and a young quarterback that they're looking to build around. But I don't think they're in any position to try and compete for even their division, much less the conference or for the Super Bowl. So New England, while may have the deepest pockets, I don't know if that's Ronnie's biggest motivation. Now, if that's the motivation, then Ronnie, we could be, it could be a problem. Ronnie could end up leaving. But if money's not the biggest motivator, I don't see why he goes to New England. And as much as the Ravens have cap issues, I think, Smitty says in the chat, I think the Chiefs are even in worse shape. I mean, you see what they've been doing as of late, offloading contracts, which I guess might make Ravens fans a little worried that maybe they are trying to clear some space for some potential additions. But man, that'd be awfully tough to see Ronnie go to the Chiefs, man. Like, come on. That would be tough to see if he ended up going there. So I still have optimism surrounding Ronnie Stanley. I don't like seeing these reports because if nothing else, it could at least make Ronnie maybe a little more bullish and his agent a little more bullish when it comes to the negotiation process. Like, we got options. Don't forget that, Ravens. We got options, and we want Ronnie here in Baltimore, and the cheaper the better for the rest of the team. Ronnie's made a lot of money, deservedly so in some cases, not so deservedly. Not that it was his fault, bad luck, injuries. But hopefully money's not the most important thing, and that we can kind of come to an agreement and get him to stay here in Baltimore for the remainder of his career for at least, the next year or two. But that'll be remaining to be seen. But look, I got some other stuff I'm going to talk about, but I'm not going to keep the guest of honor waiting any longer. And look, we got to bring in, we're talking about a guy who's top 10 as far as accuracy in the last 4 years and predicting where these guys are going to go. We're talking about the 2020 champ. You're talking about the one, the only Jason Pruett from DraftPlex. Thank you for joining us, Jason. How you been, sir?
Glenn, here we are again. It seems like we were just doing this, right? So, I've been doing good. I got a little bit more of an advanced start on things this year. So, I was kind of checking how things were progressing last year, and I hadn't even started on, when the combine rolled around, and at least now I got a board out, and I'm kind of tinkering with it a little bit after at least halfway through the combine. I'm having to catch up. I have to admit I didn't watch it live, so I just finished watching the tight ends today. So I've still got all the offensive players, but I kind of already have a good sense of those guys. We're not going to be moving guys up and down too much just based on combine results. There are a few guys I do have to go back and kind of look at and get a better sense, because that's the one thing I'll admit about this class. I'm struggling a little bit with some of these players, but we can talk through that as we kind of get into the meat of the conversation here.
Nice. Okay. I like that. A little vulnerability here, Jason. You're admitting some things here. You're letting people peek behind the curtain a little bit here. I appreciate your honesty, no doubt about it. But this year's draft, I mean, one thing I think we can say for certain, I heard Todd Monken talking about this, and it's this way every single year, and I guess it's going to be like this every year for eternity. 300 what was it, 30 years ago, 300 pounds was huge, and now 300 pounds is small. And it's just amazing. Every single year, these guys get bigger, they get faster, they get stronger. It's absolutely insane to see some of these guys at the size they are be able to move the way they can, show the bend that they have, the quickness. Is it that way this year again? Have we seen even more athletic freaks?
Yeah, and I this is just the upward trend, right? You're talking about guys that 300 doesn't look like 300 did either. That's the other thing. You watch some of these linemen, these are guys that are in shape. They've got, they carry it well, right? And so we didn't have any record-setting numbers this year. There was a couple of really interesting kind of results, especially on the offensive line, when you look at what Will Campbell did and what Mimbu did. Historically, they're 2 of 4 that I think that for their size that hit, the right metrics on the jumps and the running and everything. So, it's just the way it's going to continue. I mean, these college programs, for the most part, are well-oiled machines. They're professional, football factories, right? That's exactly what they are. That with all this other NIL money coming in, and these guys come in a lot better condition than they did in years prior. And to your point, like I was thinking about that because one of the, and I'll give this guy some love here right out of the gate. I'm not sure what to do with him. Willie Lampkin, if you've heard of him, 5'10", 270 pounds on offensive line. And so that's a really, he's an outlier of outliers, right? And I thought about that. I was like, man, somebody kind of going back, into, the glory years of my childhood with the Dallas Cowboys when they were, doing things in the postseason. And somebody was like, is he Stepnoski, right? Because Stepnoski was a center for the Cowboys during those years and was really good, but he was like undersized and he was probably like 260. And, you look at the guys now and, 320 and 340 and like these guys, they look like WWE superstars, right? I mean, they're built carrying that, but then you have this outlier that's like, what do you do with him? Like, is he able to kind of move on in the league? I mean, I think talent wise, people would say that, but I don't know that the teams have gotten there yet, right? I don't see any team unless they're just, Bill Belichick, love him. He did some weird things in the draft. He'd be like the one to draft him in the first round. But it is really curious. And we'll, like, as we kind of go through this process, we can talk about the different things. I mean, I think you're seeing some trends in some of these positions in particular. We have, like, where the wide receivers are concerned, you have a couple of bigger guys back again. I know there's been a trend downward the last few years where some of these guys are a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. And then this year you have a couple of bigger receivers that have kind of made some noise a little bit. And I will say that 2 of them are some of the guys I'm struggling with. So,
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, we also in the NFL have some bigger receivers on the move this year. At least, some have been on the move, and others are threatening that they want to be on the move. So that adds some interesting things before the draft. Is some of these teams who have these big needs, will they fill that need with one of the maybe available veterans like DK Metcalf? Brandon Ayuk is apparently up for sale if the price is right, even though they just got rid of Debo. I don't know what's going on in San Fran. They had a year of injuries, and they're getting rid of every player on their team and all their talent. It's kind of crazy. But all right, well, here's where I want to start. I want to start with a couple of things that I think benefit the Ravens, and I want to start and get your take on at least the top of the positions. Anytime the Ravens have a quarterback, I'm, of course, rooting for as many quarterbacks to get drafted in the first round. We say this every year. Nothing changes. Lamar Jackson, in our opinion, is the best quarterback in football. And so, obviously, we're not looking at quarterback, but we want as many to go and as often as possible in the first round to push those better players that are non-quarterbacks down to 27. So, I'm going to throw this up here. I am very curious about quarterback because I've talked to, a lot of fans and, of other teams, and it just doesn't seem like this is a great year for quarterbacks. And but others are saying now they're just misunderstood. They're just not seeing what I'm seeing is what they're telling me. So I guess the question is, what are you seeing from the quarterback position? How many do you have first round grades on? Who's number one? And is this a bad quarterback class overall?
So let me be careful with how I want to put this. You mentioned the peek behind the curtain earlier.
Yeah.
So when I build my first board, it's purely what I see on the tape, and then I kind of go back and I kind of try to take a temperature. I'm not making calls to my friends in the NFL I don't have those people. I know a lot of the guys in this space do, and so they're
Yeah.
getting a sense of that. Um, when I did that, I did not have a first round quarterback.
Wow.
I still don't.
Wow.
That doesn't mean that we won't see first round quarterbacks drafted. Um, I think that it's hard to kind of go back in time into the Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, Matt
Mm-hmm.
Corral draft and get a sense of that. This is comparable. Um, for me, like as I made these adjustments, and again, by the time we get to the end of this thing, I'll have to determine whether I've got Cam Ward in my one column. And again, I'm not I don't necessarily grade these on a point scale or anything like that. I just look at where these guys going to be drafted. Cam Ward will be drafted. He's probably going to get drafted in the top 5. Do I agree with that? Who's to say? I'm not building a team.
Mm-hmm.
Shadur, I think, is a level below that. And where I had problems with both of them specifically, I think those are the only two that really warrant for first round consideration. Let me just make that point. Um, I looked at both of them initially, and I was like, those are second round quarterbacks. Because for me, it's equating them to who I've seen most recently, right? And we looked at what was this last year or the year before when we had we're going to get quarterbacks 1, 2, 3, 4. We had C.J. Stroud, we had Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, Bryce
Mm-hmm.
Young, and Will Levis goes in the second round. I feel like these guys at best are on that level. I'm not somebody. I'm not going to be talked into talk myself into. Well, Cam Ward's a number 1 pick. He may go there for sure. I just saw a lot that I was like, man, it's questionable, and I was like, I can't sell myself on that. By the end, like I said, I think it's already been kind of clear. Like he'll be drafted early. I don't know that this will be a situation where we had Kenny Pickett go in the first round of the Steelers, and then Malik Willis down in the third round or something whenever he got drafted by the Titans, I believe, because I know I don't know where I think he's in Green Bay now.
Yep.
I think you'll probably end up getting 2. I thought it was really interesting that Lance Zierlein put out a mock draft this week and had Shadur going 29 to the Browns, trading up. Um, you know, who's to say that? But sometimes these guys that hear things float that stuff out. I think I've talked about Mel Kiper doing that. He starts floating things out there because he's either told that or he wants to put it out there and see what the thoughts are. So I think at best you'll get 2. If somebody gets a wild hair and they're looking at like Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart, I know Quinn Ewers started getting a little bit of
when Will Howard had about the whole, I mean, have you seen a worse quarterback perform? Is this the reason why quarterbacks elect not to throw at the combine? Is Will Howard an example of that?
I saw a little bit of that because I didn't watch it live. Like I said, I've still got to watch the running backs, the quarterbacks, and the wide receivers. Usually I just dislike watching that day because that's the one that's mostly geared to the casual fan, and they just go to the talking heads and you barely see anything. But I saw a little bit of that on Twitter of his throws, and I guess the opposite fan bases that were there, whoever that was made up of, whether that was Notre Dame or whoever else that was close, was like, razzing him the whole time. And, I saw some people talking about, well, the quarterbacks are coached to throw it to this spot, and so receivers need to be coached up. I don't know. Some of them, they'll just look wild, right? So, yeah, I don't know how we're going to do. Like from a tape, I thought he had a good chance to go on day 2, maybe towards the end. We look at these, if we're kind of looking deeper into the draft, your top 100 picks, right? Thought maybe 5 to 6 of these guys probably have a chance there. There's some other names popping up that I struggle with because Tyler Shuck, for some reason, is like a second round grade, and on the tape, I was like, not quite sure. And then he's 26 and he has an injury history. And I was like,
Mm,
it's great that you spin the ball, but like, is somebody going to invest a top 100 pick in him? Maybe. I don't know. But last year we also had,
mm.
Michael Pratt's going to get drafted in the top 100 picks, and I know we were on the day 3 recap, and I was like, I don't even know where he went. Did he get drafted at all? He went in like the end of the 6th round or something. So you never know where these guys are going to get drafted. But I think, just dialing back to the original point of the conversation, first round, I think 2 probably. And like I said, if somehow Jalen Milroe turns it on and people are blown away by the athleticism, and they're like, I can do something with him, or Jackson Dart, who's gotten a lot of momentum, kind
Mhm.
of postseason into this process. Again, I hadn't watched him in the combine or whatever, but I know some people have kind of floated him in the first round.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't count on the run in the top 10 picks or so to kind of push
Man,
some of these other players down. So
I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. I was really hoping this was going to be a year where, yeah, we know it's not a great year, but we're desperate, and so we're taking
yeah.
a quarterback anyway, even if it is, far before where that player maybe should go, judging by their talent. But one player I think is the most exciting, the guy that everyone can't wait to see what happens draft night, but really what happens after that in his career, and that's Travis Hunter, who some are unsure if he can play both ways at the next level at his size and really just the amount of energy that would take to play those two positions. That I mean, I don't think find many positions that have to run more often than wide receiver and corner, and he's trying to do both at the very highest level. I've heard some are worried that drafting Travis Hunter, if you're one of those teams that is picking at the top of the draft, you're typically in rebuild mode. You typically have a lot of different areas in which you need to rebuild your team. And there's some saying that, man, if you take Travis Hunter as a rebuilding team, because then they're worried about his second contract, because what happens if he's a great receiver and a great corner? What the hell is his contract going to look like when it comes time to actually be paid? But look, I guess that's for down the line. But what's your take on him as a corner versus a wide receiver? What is he best at, and what do you think he'll like? Do you think there's a chance he could play both at the next level, and that's why somebody is going to go out and get him in the top 3, top 5 of the draft?
Yeah, it's challenging because, as I approach this coming in and starting in January or, whatever, I'm kind of behind on what the narratives are for these guys. And I know, obviously Heisman Trophy, a lot of production at both sides of the ball. But I feel like once you get to the NFL, it is a whole different ball game. And like, I don't think you draft him expecting him to be your number 1 corner and your number 1 receiver. Something's got to give on one or the other, right? And I thought it was telling that when they brought him to the combine, they designate him as a cornerback. He didn't, as far as I know, work out at all at wide receiver. Maybe he did some after the kind of general workout. For me, I struggle because, again, I come into this a lot of times and I know the names and I want to watch them and I want to kind of get my own sense of who they are. And some of these guys I come in wanting to like more than I do. And I don't know that I liked Travis Hunter at both positions at the level he's been advertised.
Hmm.
And maybe that's just personal preference, right? He's a bit on the smaller side. I honestly, when I kind of just initially watched him and the takeaways I took was that he looks like a cornerback playing wide receiver, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's kind of like if you were to go back and oddly enough watch Dion
Mm-hmm.
playing wide receiver when he played, and it looks different, it feels different. It doesn't mean that he's not super talented. It doesn't mean that he can't be the number 1 wide receiver out of this class. I just don't know, like, if you're the physicality, right, of
Mm-hmm.
the NFL game versus playing college where everything's spread out and, maybe you're not as challenged as much. At the same time, on the positive side, if he's this good and again, as a prospect, right, to where he's counting as a number 1 cornerback and number 1 receiver on boards, essentially, you kind of have to look at it that way. How good could he be if he actually focused on just one position? Like, it could be a hindrance to him
Yeah.
that he's played both ways. this
Yeah.
whole time. Maybe he could have been an outstanding, like, runaway number one pick as a wide receiver. Doesn't, he could very well go number one here now, just as it is. But has it hurt? Because, there's something to the jack of all trades, master of none. You've seen this with this terminology about position flex. I've seen it a lot in Dallas because it's like, well, this guy can do this and this. He never gets good at either one, right? And that's just playing on one side of the ball. You have your guard tackle, you got your defensive end, defensive tackle. Sometimes you have the safety corner hybrids or something like that, and then you never get him to the maximum potential of what he could be.
But with him being number one ranked in both, isn't this, he's just the outlier, right? Like
oh yeah, it's something that we really haven't seen ever. I mean, you could go back into the annals of history and the days when they played in leather helmets and probably find Jim Thorpe or some sort of dual sport athlete who also played football that could play offense and defense. This is something, obviously, I've been doing this is my 11th year. The gray is in the beard now. I've never seen a player where I'm like, I don't even know how to like qualify this. And like, I have to remember like the number of players that I have on one page is different than the other because I've got to count him twice. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you really don't know. One team might look at him like, we're going to draft him as a wide receiver because he pairs good with X. I don't know. I haven't looked at everything specifically. Another team's like, he's going to come in and play at corner. If we can squeeze it in at wide receiver, we're already good there. We may look at that. We'll find a way to get him the ball, a few touches a game or something like that. I don't think he's going out lining up every snap as one of your 11 on both sides of the ball. He may have an ambition to do that. I just don't see a team that's gonna risk that, because somebody made an interesting point. I think it was on the draft show that on DallasCowboys.com. It's like, if he gets hurt, you're out of luck in two positions.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting. Like, once his name gets called, like what they would say. Will they call him a wide receiver? Will they call him a cornerback? Will they just call him Travis Hunter? Football player.
Yeah.
So
he'll
go in the top 5 to play something. Maybe both, but we'll have to wait and see.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most intriguing things I've seen in years when it comes to the draft is what happens to this kid. Where does he go? I hope he goes to a good situation. I don't want to see this guy's talent get wasted with some dump of an organization that has no quarterback or like you said, tries to run him into the ground by overplaying him on both sides. I think it has to be situational. I think you have to put him in, especially on the defensive side, if you want to make a real run at him being on both sides of the ball type player. I think certainly on defense, it has to be situational, maybe high leverage, third downs, something to where you're not just running the guy ragged. I don't want him out there on rundowns. I can tell you that, Jason. I don't want them out there on first and second down or in goal line plays. No, thank you. Well, I guess I might want him defending that fade route, though, actually, the goal line. So I don't know. But, yeah, it's going to be a fun thing to see, to watch this guy's career. He's certainly special, and he's, like DK said, he's trying to be the Shohei Ohtani of the NFL, which is pretty insane to think about. But as you kind of came into the show, I was talking about the situation around Ronnie Stanley and how the Ravens are in hopes to, they're in talks and in hopeful to bring him back. But there's some competition, some real competition that's fighting for his services. The Patriots have named him as their number one target. The Chiefs are also going to be expected to target him heavily if he hits free agency. But the Ravens are still hoping to bring him back. If they fail at that, how many at the tackle position do you look at as being able to play day one, but also not just play day one, but play day one on the left side? Because we already got a pretty damn good right tackle here in Baltimore, drafted last year out of Washington. But how many day one starters are available at left tackle this year?
Yeah, it's offensive tackle in this class, specifically the left tackle is another one where we've got some things to figure out, right? The one that's been at the top of kind of the board this whole time through, Will Campbell, right, from LSU. he measured in a little short in the arms, which it can be problematic. He would be an outlier to play left tackle with, I believe, is 32 and 5/8 inch arms. Right, the kind of the threshold is 33 for most teams. They prefer him to be 34 or longer. Um, and he's been the one where is he moving into guard? Then you've got Mimbu, who's been a right tackle, who kind of going in was like, maybe he should play guard. And it's like, no, I think he could play tackle. Can you flip flop him? I know we talked about that last year. There were a lot of right tackles that could play left tackle or left tackle to move to right tackle. Um, Josh Simmons, I think, from Ohio State would have been the one that would have been probably the top 5 offensive tackle. But he has a knee injury that, I don't know that the evaluations come back on how that looks and how that will impact his draft grade, but he would certainly be a first round tackle there. And then you have Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon, who's probably, that he's probably going to be in that neighborhood of like in the 20s, possibly in play for the Ravens there. I don't know what their exact pick is there late in the first round, but I figure it's around where they usually are, the late 20s.
Every year. Where we go.
Yeah. So Campbell and Mimbu probably don't get there, but Simmons, depending on what the injury evaluation is, Connerly will be there. There's Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, who he's a little heavier footed, but he's a left tackle. He's been pretty solid. He's kind of been in that late 1, early 2 kind of conversation, but that's pretty much it. It's
Kelvin Banks.
Kelvin Banks, yeah, I think, do you see him as a tackle or a guard? I look at him as a guard, but like I think he's, at least the measurement wise, I think he's would be perfectly fine at tackle. So yeah, I have him in guard, so that's why I didn't see him kind of in my purview there. So that, we're not looking at the 7 or 8 or 9 possible tackles going in the first round. I think you might see 4, maybe 5. And you would be on the kind of the back end of that first to 1 to 1.5 tier in terms of the tackles to draft there in the first round. But there's some interesting other players that I think like Donovan Jackson, Ohio State. He played guard, but he took over at left tackle and was pretty solid there for Ohio State for the rest of the year. I look at him as a guard. He might be in that mix too of like, we think he can play tackle for us, but if not, he can swing inside the guard. So those are probably the names you're looking at. A little bit further down, you'd look at somebody like Charles Grant from William and Mary. I know he's got a lot of fans. I think he was, in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 right now. He didn't run at the combine or anything like that. I think he just went and did measurements. I don't recall if he did the workout or not. But I know certainly he was somebody that they were talking about. Like once we kind of start seeing him move around and stuff, he's going to be moving up the board. Let me look at what his numbers
I got 6'4", 300.
Charles Grant.
Yeah.
Let's see. 6'4", 6'0", 311. Okay. So it's pretty consistent for most of the tackles. Most of these guys are kind of in the 310 to 320 range. You don't have the bigger, the 330, the Amarius Mims types and whatnot this year. Like, like Campbell's 319, Mimbu is 332. Like he's probably the one exception there. But yeah, those guys, there are a couple of other ones that I do kind of like, but Anthony Belton, who's North Carolina State. I'm not sure if people see him that high, or maybe it's just me. I really liked him. He was at the Senior Bowl. And then who was the other one? Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College, but he's a right tackle, massive right tackle. So I'm not quite Falele size, but pretty close. He's like 6'8", and I think like 340 or something like that. So
we just kick him into guard. That's what we do in Baltimore. We'll just 6'8". Sounds like a guard,
Yes, that's been the curious thing. I was like, usually it's like 6'3", 6'4", these shorter tackles, but then I'm looking at like somebody 6'6" or 6'8", like movement. I was like, that just seems odd because I don't recall a lot of 6'6" guards unless I'm, going back in the day and playing Madden and I had like 6'10",
Yeah.
players and stuff like that of the computer generated. So,
Are you talking
um,
Pro Bowl alternate Daniel Falele, 6'8", right guard, right in Baltimore? You're not going to find many 380 to 390-pound guards, but
yeah,
yeah, he doesn't play 6'8". Let me tell you, Jason, unless he's stumbling. The best block he had. I mean, look, we get on him a lot in this, but I still think his best block was when he lost his balance and was stumbling forward and just ran into someone, absolutely destroyed him. But hey, we might have to deal with Falele again this year, so I should watch what I'm saying.
I want to draw attention to one of the
Please,
comments here. Tanya. I'm not
yeah.
sure. I'm sorry if I pronounce it correctly. She said they all have short arms, which is crazy. That's one of the things coming out of the combine is like all the guys that went to the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, they all measured like an inch and change with shorter arms at the combine. People were like, what just happened here? Because everybody, like down the list, their arms were shorter. It's like they didn't magically shrink up.
Hand
So
size was an issue too, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
Milrow, his hand like increased like a whole inch
It
from the
grew.
Senior Bowl, and they were like, there was who was the guy that it was Brandon something or other from the Bengals, the quarterback. I remember the one year he came to Senior Bowl and they did like massages and stretches or whatever to grow his hand
Oh my.
to go to the combine. I was like, yeah, but you're not going to grow your hand like a whole inch. So something's off there. And somebody mentioned like, well, maybe they had like the kind of the junior scouts or whoever doing that. Maybe they didn't quite do it right, but it just seemed off because
Huh.
that NFS or whoever the company is that runs that, they do the measurements for those all-star games and the combine. So something of a disconnect there. So I'm sure a lot of these guys, when they get measured again at their pro day, they're going to have 33, 33 and a half, 34-inch arms versus
Mhm.
the 32 and 5/8. Will Campbell might have 35-inch arms by the time we get to it, and he's going number one. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who's doing the measuring here, but we need to get this person checked out. Let's guys, if so, think some people are having some issues seeing the screen that I'm showing. I'm showing.
yeah, I'm not even seeing it. So I was like,
Really?
is there an
Wow.
issue?
Oh, okay. Let me try and pull that back up then a different way because
I was like, we're just working in picture here. I was like,
now see
we're
DK
too
wasn't having.
handsome to be just in the little box in the
That's a
corner.
good point. That's a good point. Really, if you get the money makers a little bit larger here. Well, let me try and pull it up again because I think it's got value showing that. What I was doing, Jason, is every time you were bringing someone up, I was putting up their PFF like scouting report, and I thought that DK could see it, but I got a text from my wife saying I can't see the
Yeah,
what screen
do
you're.
they have their ranking on there?
Yeah, it had all that.
I was just curious to see how far down the board and how wrong they were on most of these guys.
Well, do you see it now, or is it still blank on your screen?
Yeah, no, I see it now. I see
Okay,
Abdul Carter and James
okay,
Pierce Jr.
man.
I'll
I'm
say
sorry, folks.
I was
Damn.
doing a little bit of, just kind of getting some homework done. I was like, I saw Cole did a mock draft, and I think he was using the PFF board, and
Yeah,
started seeing some names that he didn't pick, but I started seeing like that dude is not going to be there, and not
yeah.
by like a few picks. It was like 2 or 3 rounds off.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, you
maybe
know
they've
what,
not caught up yet.
Jason, they don't know the trick that I've been using. I've been using for years is I have your positional rankings up that has all your grades, and that's how I make sure my draft is accurate. I mean, I don't pull these names out of nowhere because also I know you're probably going to be at some point grading mine and Jimmy's mock drafts, and I know that if I pick guys that are actually in line with, that I'm going to win. So look, I mean, Cole just needs to pull up DraftPlex, just like everyone needs to do. Pull up DraftPlex, look at the positional rankings, look at the big board, and you'll know where these guys are actually going because as good as PFF is, they're no Jason Pruett when it comes to predicting where guys are going and when they're going, and there's just no
No,
doubt about it. But Jason, I do want to talk about the edge group because this is a group where I think the Ravens have a real chance at finding a guy who can help them out day one. I think it's a position of need, even though if you just look at the numbers, I think they were second in the league in sack production without having a real guy. Like they got the ageless wonder in Cal Van Noy. They got the fifth-year option picked up on Odafe Owe, who finally broke the double-digit sack mark there. But they still to me don't have a guy who, like I remember in third down back in the day, I just always expected Terrell Suggs to turn it up a notch on third down, to go to that extra gear and put pressure and make the life of the quarterback hell. I don't think we have that guy yet, and I'm hopeful that maybe this is the year. I know Abdul Carter is the obvious number one selection at the edge position, but how many teams are worried about the medicals? Wasn't there a stress fracture found in his foot? Is that
Yeah, it
causing
was.
the slide?
Yeah, it wasn't. I think it was referred to as a stress reaction. So I don't know if
Okay.
that means a fracture like that. That's a phrasing I haven't heard before.
Okay.
And as far as I understand, it's the response to that's a little mixed. Some teams I think are in his camp. Obviously, it's like they're not worried about it. He's just gonna, I think, rehab and therapy and do that. He's just not going to do surgery. Some teams are worried about it. Some teams are not. We'll just have to see. I
Yeah.
wouldn't expect him unless there's something super complicated about, his recovery from that. I don't see that's going to, affect his grade too much at all.
Okay.
I fully expect him to go in the top, 5 to 8
Mm-hmm.
picks. And then from there, I think there's a little bit of a race between a number of these guys, especially going down the list there. James Pierce Jr. is kind of interesting. There's some apparently, again, I don't know this firsthand, but it's certainly been reported some character stuff with him. And I even heard, I think somebody mentioned like it's possible he could be there in the third round.
What?
Yeah, and it's whatever it is, it's that. And again, some of this stuff is going to have to be
Please let
unearthed.
him be at 27, Jason. Please.
So we'll have to learn that as we go along. I don't know how much of that'll be disclosed, but I'm sure that you'll get some allusions to whatever it may be that is causing him to do that. Obviously, he performed really well at the combine. And so, some teams he might go in the top 10, whatever it is, it's like teams okay with it. Maybe don't see it that way. Maybe there's an explanation to whatever that may be. Right now I have him as a 1-2 because I'm like, that's the kind of thing that I don't have any information to go off of. That.
What about
medicals.
talent? Where's he at talent-wise?
Talent, I think he's pretty much a consensus like top 20 type prospect. I don't think he had quite the year this year that his previous year kind of projected him to be more of a top 5, maybe up there with Abdul Carter. But if everything was equal, he'd probably be a first round pick and probably be in the top half of the draft.
What do you think this does? The fact that he had 5 less sacks, but he had 15 more hurries. Because I know that a lot of times in the NFL they say sacks are a lot of times an overinflated number, that we would rather have rushes, QB hits, hurries,
pressures.
Does 15 more hurries outweigh the 5 less sacks in your opinion?
It can. You just have to go back and look at all that in context. It was like there was a couple players that I watched that where they had really high sack numbers, and I went back and watched it. It was like coverage sacks. It was like cleanup duty. It wasn't I'm beating my guy and getting him and putting him in the ground. So like that stuff does matter because those sack numbers might not always tell the full story.
Right.
But all of that put together, right? It's doing that calculation of what does the pressure looks like, what the hits look like. There's another guy we'll probably talk about here in a minute that's kind of that same conversation. There you go, Shamar Stewart, who physically, the comp was Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
He had 4.5 sacks his entire college career. And some of the reports out is that it's the A&M scheme because his teammate Nick Scorton, same way, like he came from Purdue, transferred to A&M. Sack numbers went down, and he was another guy that was kind of like a consensus, like top first round player. And now we're not sure. Maybe he probably goes in the second round. Shamar Stewart kind of blew the testing out of the water, so he's now in that mix for being a top 10 pick. And the production's not there, but he might be one of these guys where like his best football is ahead of him. Here's another guy that I'm struggling with because like you have to weigh the production versus the projection, right? Somebody like him, somebody like Mikael Williams from Georgia, same thing. Like they hit all check all the boxes for the physical, but the production is just not quite there. and they've probably got room to grow into what you think they could be. And that's a lot of what the draft is. It's not always the guy that maybe got maxed out in college and did everything, but where is the ceiling at? It's the ceiling versus the floor. Both of these guys might have lower floors, but the ceiling could be through the roof, right? So those two are both probably looking at, potentially top 10. They're a notch below Abdul Carter. I have him also a notch below Mike Green from Marshall, who is maybe doesn't have the size, and he's coming from a different level of competition, right? But if the stuff that he does, it translates. And he had a good showing at the Senior Bowl. And so he's looking at probably a mid first round kind of selection. Possibly he goes in the top 10, possibly he goes in the 20s. So he's got a good range there, just based on how teams view these other edge rushers versus, where they view him, right? So it just, again, flavors of ice cream is kind of the phrasing that's used a lot within this. Then you have a couple of other guys like Donovan Izaraku, right there from Boston College. He's a little smaller. I think he's he's like 6'3", 248 or so. I have to go back and look at the numbers.
6'2", 247. Yeah.
6'2", 247. And so he's started to get a little bit of first round buzz, probably towards the back end. So he might be somebody that's in consideration for the Ravens there. And you have Princely Umamielen from Ole Miss. So he's somewhere in that, probably more of a fringe first round, most likely day 2. And then, you have the Ohio State, a little bit more of the, they're not going to give you the mind-blowing pass rush, but they're really solid, JT Tuimalau and Jack Sawyer. I think both of them are really solid. But, they might not be the 10 sacks a year type of guys. Olawufemi Oladejo. Yeah. Kyle Kennard, Landon Jackson, Ashton Gelati. Those are all guys that are probably going to be in the top 100, and those are probably all, day one starters for you. So, I mean, I think there's a good list of names that, are there that are going to be really solid and really good. And there's just a couple there that you're not quite sure what you're going to get, but man, they on paper, they're not there. But when you look at them, you watch them move around and stuff, it's like, yeah, they're probably going the first round and probably early. So
it sounds like you're predicting that to be a position that's one of the most, if not the most targeted in the first round. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would believe so. I think defensive tackle is going to be. And one thing about the edge rushers, we didn't talk about the linebackers, the prop linebackers, Jalen Walker, Jahad Campbell. Both of them has pass rush ability. They're both kind of more hybrid type players, and both, where you're not quite sure, is Jalen Walker more of an edge? If he's an edge, he's a little undersized. Is Jahad Campbell more of an edge? Well, if he is, he's, coming from playing more inside. So I think both of those guys are going to be, probably top 20 picks. And they're both going to, contribute some levels to the pass rushers, whether they're kind of that chess piece or, more like designated pass rushers where they can come in and kind of rush from, inside, outside, anywhere kind of from end to end. So there's a good mix of pass rushers. If you just look at pass rush as a whole, you're probably looking at maybe a quarter of the picks that are going the first round. So,
wow.
eight picks or so. And that's probably, I think I'm pretty confident in saying that.
Damn. Okay. So yeah, it's going to be certainly a position that if the Ravens are looking to get one, they're probably going to be getting they're picking at 27. If you're talking about a quarter of the picks are going to be in that, they're going to get the 7th, 8th best guy, unless their board is wildly different than the rest of the teams. Then I don't like that. I like when the Ravens get to pick the best, the guy like when Kyle Hamilton fell as a safety, we got the best safety. When Linderbaum fell at center, we got the best center. I'm more in the idea of going towards, let's not take the 6th or 7th best guy at a position of need. Let's take the best guy at a different position, even if it's not the most glaring need. And I think this year, that position that I'm excited to get your take on, that I think the Ravens, it is a position of need, maybe not as glaring as the others, but I think safety is a position where the Ravens might be able to get true value at 27 and also make their defense a whole hell of a lot better. This is a defense that likes to play three safeties, allow Kyle Hamilton to float around the field and be truly that unique player that he is. Even though he's shown that he can pretty much do whatever you ask of him. I'd like to imagine the Ravens would like to move this guy around and not have to keep him at the back end like they did in the second half of the season after Marcus Williams was benched. What are you hearing out of, because Malachi Starks, unbelievable production, everything you're hearing as far as the teammate, the guy, great, but had a pretty shaky, I think, and that's a nice way of putting it, combine performance. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. I read that he was the slowest 3-cone and what was the other one? 2 drills. He was the slowest of anyone at his position. What the hell is going on at safety? Is Malachi good or am I crazy?
Yeah, to put that into context, not everyone tested on all of those, but Nick Emenwari did.
Yes, he did.
So by comparison, everybody did look slower. But yeah, Malachi, he's one that maybe he's not great tester, and I think there's a few of these guys that there's something to be said for that, or they didn't test well in one drill and then tested better in the other. I don't think he's quite fallen out of that first round consideration. I don't know that as I watched the tape from this year, like I know he had a better 2023 than 2024 as far as I understand. But I think he's still a consideration, and I think he would be he's going to be a better player than a tester. I think it might be a Kyle Hamilton situation because Kyle Hamilton didn't have the best postseason kind of draft process, but he turned out pretty good so far, right? So
Yeah.
I think at where we are now, like I know not everybody is in love with Nick Emenwari despite the out there numbers. And that's just like, listen, people have different kind of approaches to this and different opinions on how they view these players. And I think Mel might have had Nick Emenwari as the Ravens pick.
Yep.
And this was pre-combine. But does that move him up? Did everybody kind of knew he would test well, but if it's just a tick above that, obviously when you look at it on paper, those numbers are wild, but does that move him up as a safety playing that position into the top 20? Possibly.
Right.
I don't know. Does Malachi move out of the top 20? Because
I'm hearing them two flipped as a result of
combine. So when you look at the perception of it, I think that's where we are now. It doesn't mean both of them go in the first round. It doesn't mean either one of them go in the first round. But I think there's enough there to suggest that Nick Emenwari is going in the first round. I don't know about Malachi at this point. I think there could be just the trust the tape crowd that are like, yeah, he's a top 20 player all day, but he also plays safety. And when you have a class that's deep in edge rushers, deep in defensive tackles, we still get the quarterback conversation like we talked about at the beginning. You don't know. There's a couple of good running backs that are certainly getting kind of the buzz there early. Wide receiver, I think you've got probably 5, if you count Travis Hunter as a wide receiver, 5 receivers that could go in the first round. You got a couple of good tight ends. We talked about the offensive linemen. I don't think corner's going to stretch too far in the first round. I think most of those guys might go in the second because there's a lot of injury and that sort of thing that are there. So can you have a safety, the best safety there for you at 27? Possibly.
Oh man.
If not, you might have number 2, and number 2 might be as good as number 1, depending on your view.
Jason, this just feels like, I see in the chat people are worried about Nick's tape. And look, this just feels like this feels like the Ravens. Like every year, because somebody slips and falls right into the hands of the Ravens. And I feel like Malachi might be just the guy this year. They said the same stuff. You mentioned Kyle Hamilton. They said the same stuff about him and his 40 time, his lack of speed. it's like the instincts is what people
Mm-hmm.
overlook. He starts heading to his destination long before that guy who might be faster because his instincts aren't as good. And so he gets there quicker than a guy who might be faster than him in a foot race because his instincts are just incredible. And I'm this is my early hints, or I'm thinking Malachi might end up slipping all the way down, which is absolutely incredible if you look at his production, his tape. But as far as Nick Emanwari, what did you see from the tape? Like, did the tape match those incredible measurables that we saw from the combine?
I would probably be not the best person to ask that. I don't think that it did. I didn't quite see that instinct because, like, I really, as a cheat for this, when I did the tape board, he wasn't even my number one safety. Neither was Malachi. It was Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, who was hurt for most of the year. Because what I saw from him, I was a little bit more impressed by. As I said, it seemed like Malachi had a down year, and Nick Emanwari didn't. Like, the size and the physical ability stands out, but the tape, it didn't stand out to that degree. So, I mean, it's, again, I'm struggling with a lot of these guys because I'm having to go back and probably watch quite a few of them to, is that there? Because I've got to inform this in the end for like a mock draft to get scored. That is he going as high as these numbers would suggest that he was? Because the comp for him was a bigger, faster Derwin James, who went I think 17 or 18 that year.
Yep.
And you have to justify that against the positional value. You have to justify that against the tape. I see somebody who's like, Nick is another Obi Melifonwu.
Oh boy.
Yeah, of one of the gold medalists in the underwear Olympics.
Yes.
Obi Melifonwu,
yes,
years
he
ago.
Hey, one of the great Madden players of all time. Let me tell you, 6'4",
absolutely
flies. Yeah, reminds me. Who was that? Two brothers that played safety. They could absolutely hit back in the day. Oh man. One played for the Bengals. Oh man, it's killing me. I'll circle back to that. But you're right. There's these guys that are just incredible athletes, but they're just not great football players. And I think the Ravens typically do a good job of parsing through that. Although I do think they get caught up in it. Dafe Owe might have been an example of when they got caught up in it. Had no sack production, but had the greatest workout in history. Now, some say that it worked out to some degree. Did have 10 sacks last year, but as a first-round talent, I think some were hoping it would happen a little quicker. But yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? Like, it's all about projecting and what can happen next. It's not because we've also seen a ton of talented college players who never transitioned and never played well, and their skills that made them, excellent and elite in college just didn't translate to the NFL, and others who struggled and couldn't get it done at the college level end up being greats in the NFL. So yeah, it's going to be a real. When you look at this draft overall, would you say this is a more of a strong offense, defense, or is it pretty equal on both sides of the ball?
I think it's a stronger defensive buy. I think the front seven, with that defensive line, that edge class. To be fair, I do think this is a decently deep safety class.
Okay.
I think you can have starter value well into the top 100 and probably into the fourth round with some of these guys. On the offense, I feel, we talked about quarterback. Running back is going to be pretty deep. That's going to stretch like starter value probably into like the fifth round, maybe. Wide receiver, I don't think is quite as deep as previous years. Tight end class.
Let's talk about that. Can we
tight
talk
end
about
class is pretty deep. Yeah, sure.
Because that's another key. They say the Ravens are missing a big guy. In years past, they've made the tight end their big guy. That's their big pass catchers. Their talented group of tight ends. But I'm done with that. I want a big receiver who can get high point the ball, can stretch the field a little bit. We got some good ones with Zay and Bateman, but we're missing that big guy. Who's on the board here that you look at that will be available first and foremost? And it fits that mold of being a bigger target on the outside for Lamar.
Yeah, the two that come to mind, and oddly enough, again, two that I'm struggling with, are Trey Harris from Ole Miss, Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. Jaden Higgins had a pretty good showing at the combine. That's one where I didn't quite see it on tape with him.
Hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that it's not true. I just need to go back and look because maybe there was something I didn't see. I like his teammate, who's more of a slot, a little better, Jalen Noel, who also has had a really good process. He had a great Senior Bowl, had a great combine, but he doesn't match what you're looking for, right? The other one, Trey Harris, that's a guy that was kind of in the top 40 for a lot of people, and I was just like, I don't know that he gets drafted in the top 100. I might have to begrudgingly put him there because there's enough smoke from enough people to think like he could be a second round pick. I just felt like the things that I was hearing didn't line up with what I was seeing. And maybe in my old age, I'm too long in the tooth to do this anymore. And I just don't see it with this wide receiver. But both of these guys reminded me of players I've seen in the past where it hasn't translated. I don't know that Savion Williams from TCU is that guy, but he's like former quarterback. He's more of I call him a flex where like he does a lot of different things. He played quarterback and then he became a receiver. They have him a lot of things going out of the backfield. He's just a guy you get him the ball in space and he's pretty electric. But he's bigger. He's like 6'3", I believe, and
just under 6'4". Yep.
Yeah. So he's one that could be in that mix in kind of like day two. But he's another one that's probably you're going to have to figure out what to do with him and hope that he develops into that. There's a couple of guys that I liked later on. Keandre Lambert Smith from Auburn. I thought, he's more of a deep threat. He's a little bit taller. And then Dante Thornton Jr., who's I think he's 6'5", and 6'4", 6045, 205, deep threat, just go 9 route. Just that's what you do, right?
That's what I want. Yes, that's what I want.
So he might be somebody to look at probably, 4th, 5th round. I kind of liked him. I don't think he's going to go early because while I don't think he's as well-rounded as some of these other players that, I have a little bit ahead of him. But if you're looking for a bigger receiver, those are probably the guys, the guys that are probably a tick underneath that are going to go higher. Jack Besh, who's kind of inside and outside from TCU. And then I want to make sure I say his name right, Alec Ayamanor from Stanford, who is more of an outside receiver too. Doesn't have quite the size, but he's a good player. And those guys will probably both be 2nd or 3rd round.
What the hell happened to Isaiah Bond? I mean, this guy going up to the combine is flexing, saying he's going to break records. What did he just run poorly? What's the kind of buzz around Isaiah Bond and his lack of speed at the combine?
Well, he was supposed to be the guy for Texas this year, so I'm told. So I've heard. So it's been reported.
It's your guy. It's your squad, right? Texas.
No, I don't really follow that. I heard about him enough kind of into the the college football playoff. I thought, well, I'll have to take a look at him. And then people are saying he had a disappointing year. I think he got hurt maybe, or had some nagging injuries into where Matthew Golden kind of took over. And then Matthew Golden ran a 4.29 at the combine and
fastest one,
ran what Isaiah Bond's supposed to, and maybe not as advertised as a 4.1. Which has never been clocked of anyone. You can believe the legend of Deion Sanders, perhaps, or other folks out there. But, I don't think Isaiah Bond's going to be for everybody. I still think he's good enough to go in the top 100. But he's oddly enough, running behind a few of these other receivers as far as the stack goes. So, he's somebody, maybe he could slip into the 4th round. I don't know. I have him still relatively high. I think on my rankings currently, I have him as kind of my last 2-3, which would be my, top, let's say probably top 90. So, I expect him to go by the time the 3rd round is over.
How good is this guy going to be? Everything I've seen, I mean, this guy looks like an absolute freak of nature. His ability to to make guys miss and to run after catch is incredible. Obviously, body control, hands, unbelievable. The circus catches he makes in drills and warm-ups are just second to none. Is Tatario McMillan going to be the next, like challenging Jay Jettas, Jamar Chase? Is he that good, or is this more of he's a TikTok guy?
Well, at this stage, and what everybody's been saying is like he'll be there for the Ravens to take by the time this process is over. This is so again, going back to when I first watched tape, this is the fewest amount of first round grades, I'll call them, that I've ever had. And to start out, I only had 9. And if you think about it, like I usually have about 20, and I consider that not that they're the best players, but I'm like, these 20 players are locks to go in the first round. Usually I miss like one of these because somebody gets injured or, they don't quite make it or whatever it may be. He was one of the 9. I think as a receiver prospect, I think he's the best receiver prospect, despite having Travis Hunter ranked there. I think he's the best receiver prospect, but everybody's down on him because he didn't run a 40. They don't think he runs fast. They don't think he's, all that against NFL competition. I don't know. I watched it. I was pretty blown away by the things he was doing on the field. The size certainly stands out. I don't know in the end if he slips, if if we're over analyzing this. One of the comps that's been attached to him is Drake London, who's a player that I struggled with. But I didn't say like, oh, he's gonna drop. I was like, he was like one of the ones that, I felt by the end of the process was like, he's going to play for the Falcons. They're going to draft him at number 8 or number 9 or wherever they were. And that's who he's kind of been comped with. But I was way more impressed with Tet McMillan than I was Drake London when he came out. So, I don't think that anybody's done enough to overtake him at this point. I think, people are impressed with Matthew Golden run the 4.29, which, is great and all. He's going in the first round. I wouldn't use that as to inform me moving him ahead of Tet McMillan. So, in the end, we'll just have to wait and see. But I think he's, they've got AJ Green there. I think somebody equated him to a better T Higgins. So he has that size that's just really impressive. But like the things that he does, the body control, the 50-50 stuff, like it's all good. And like somebody equates the difference of running a 4.48 versus a 4.51, and maybe he's a 4.6, but when he gets open and catches everything, like it's hard to ignore that. So
yeah, no doubt. I mean, he might not have I don't know. When I saw him pulling away from guys, splitting defenders with the ball in his hands, I think this guy is one of the cleanest looking wide receiver prospects that we've seen in a while. It's hard for me to find many negatives around him, but I'm not the expert that Mel Kiper is. I watch him. His hairline continues to just go backwards. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It just gets taller.
It really is. I'm like, this guy, man. I love me some Mel, and I will say, there's not many guys who are more dialed in, at least for the position that the Ravens end up going with. He seemingly always gets the position right, and a lot of times gets the guy right as well. Unless something goofy happens, but he's pretty in tune with the Ravens. I will say that. But yeah, I think receiver is very much so on the board, but I don't think receiver is something that the Ravens are going to attack early. I could be 100% wrong about that. But the one last one I wanted to talk about, one last position with you before I let you get out of here. And I appreciate you spending so much time with us, Jason, as always. If you guys want to be more in the know when it comes to the NFL draft, make sure you guys go over to DraftPlex, check out his big board, check out the positional rankings. He will certainly make you a smarter NFL draft fan. But I do want to talk about the interior guys on the offensive line. We talked a little earlier about what happens if Ronnie Stanley isn't brought back to Baltimore. Can the Ravens, get things done? As far as drafting a day one start at left tackle, well, let's say they do get Ronnie back, and that's no longer a position of need. But what is a position of need, I think, is 2 guards. We had 2 guards that filled in admirably, Falele being one of them, but I don't think they're long-term solutions at that position. So another position, I think guard and center is a position that's perfect for the Ravens to potentially, again, get the best guy or at least one of the very best guys at that position rather than the 7th or 8th best guy at other positions that may be a greater need. Who's the best guard in this draft, and how early are we going to start to see true guards going off the board?
I somewhere into the 20s, I think. Me personally, your guy right there, Tyler Booker. Like, if that doesn't say Ravens with Alabama and, guard, you know, and he's just a mauler. Like, he did not test well at all, but y'all had a pretty good tackle once upon a time that didn't test well and dropped to the 3rd round. He's since moved on, bounced around a little bit, but he was pretty good when he played for the Ravens, Orlando Brown Jr. Tyler Booker, I don't know what people were expecting from the testing, but on tape, I was like, maybe it's just because I have a an affinity for guards. I was like, this is my top 5 player. I want Tyler Booker early.
Really?
He probably goes, late first into the 2nd at some point. I think he's far and away the best guard. But he's a certain type of guard, right?
What do you mean by, is he like, can he move? Because the Ravens
he's a phone booth. He's a phone booth
okay.
guy.
Okay.
Like he's a wall. He's not going to be, on the move or pulling or anything like that. Like, stand him in place and nobody's getting through him, kind of thing. We talked about Kelvin Banks, who could be a tackle, could be a guard, might be there for you late in the 1st round. Donovan Jackson, again, who has a little bit more flexibility. I think he's a guard, though. I think he'll probably be there unless somebody loves him and gets him earlier. And then a guy that I really like that I sadly felt like I had to drop, just from the peer pressure of where people are saying and what they're saying, Jonah Sava from Arizona.
Is he a tackle?
He's a right tackle, but everybody projects him to be better guard. And he's another one where I was like, they're seeing something I'm not seeing, because I was like, I felt like he moves pretty well, and everybody else is saying he's not. So he's another player that I have a conflict with, but man, I really liked him a lot. He's big, and I felt like he did pretty well at the combine, but again, from the things that I have to hear and kind of rely on secondhand kind of information, because I'm not traveling to the Senior Bowl, I'm not traveling to the combine. It's like he's probably a 2nd round player. And if you're looking at kind of somebody that's kind of a do-it-all, Gray Zabel, who's gotten a lot of, push for 1st round late from North Dakota State, he might be in as a center. He might be in as a tackle, because he played tackle at North Dakota State, but everybody says he's better on the inside. I think he can play tackle, but he probably does project better as a guard, or in this case, a center, who's, there's a few kind of trusted names that are saying that he's going to be the top center drafted, even though that would be a position move for him. From there, you've got, Marcus Bowe from Purdue, who's a right tackle who probably moves inside to guard just for size considerations. Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, who's another tackle inside to guard. And then you have a couple of guys like Tate Ratledge, who, everything about him screams NFL guard, from the mullet to the mustache to wearing number 69 to being from Georgia. Maybe he's a cousin of Ben Cleveland for all we know, because he kind of did the same thing. But I think he was dealing with some injuries, I think, this past year. I think he's probably a 3rd or 4th round type, but probably would push to be a starter.
Why the guards seem bigger than the tackles, Jason? These guards are huge.
Yeah, and then most of your tackles might end up being guards for all we know with their short arms. So yeah, I mean, I just think that's most of the time these guys are not as athletic, and so like their calling card's going to be having better size. I guess better is relative. More size. It may not always be good weight. So there's a good, I think, range of 6, 7, 8, guards probably going in the top 100. So, you can grab a Tyler Booker, a Kelvin Banks, or Donovan Jackson there at 27. In the 2nd round, you're probably looking at Jonah from Zona, as I've heard him called. Gray Zabel's probably going the first round. He might be there though, and he would be somebody that would have the position flex to, in a pinch. I think he could play tackle. I don't think you need him to play center, but he can play guard if he needed to be, to move to any one of those positions. I think he does have that 5 position flex.
Yeah, I think that last name, Gray Zabel, I think is an interesting name with the versatility, the positional versatility the Ravens absolutely love. I mean, just look, they had Faalele, a Pro Bowl alternate guard at 6'8". They absolutely love Patrick McCary, who's played every single position on the offensive line for the Ravens since arriving in Baltimore, and signed him, liked him so much they signed him to an extension. So man, that sounds like a daggone Raven. But with the positional versatility, even if they do get Ronnie, it's not a long-term deal. So if you get a guy that you maybe start at left guard and with projections to kick out to left tackle in a couple of seasons, I think is maybe a possibility there. Quickly wanted to shout out Don C. I threw it up earlier, but Don C, thank you so much for your 5 gifted memberships. Appreciate you. As always, it's nice to see you back out here. I think it's been the last couple shows. I think we might have missed you. So nice to see you out there along with everybody else in the chat. But yeah, I think we're gonna continue talking about this draft as it gets closer, as we approach, as we get through free agency. The Ravens like to try and seal up all the holes before going into the draft so they can do their best player available. Well, we'll hope that they can do that, because what we don't want is the Ravens to go into the draft with a glaring hole where they're pigeonholed into getting a position of need that is such a position of need that they have to take it in the first round. You don't want to be in that spot. Every other team knows it, and you certainly don't want to be there. But Jason, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to talk to you many times. Going up and leading up to the NFL draft. But thank you for your expertise, and have a good evening. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks. And Jason is, of course, the legend of DraftPlex, who nobody has it more dialed in when it comes to where these guys are going. So I appreciate his time. Folks, I think that's going to be it for us tonight. Those asking for where Jimmy was, he was out saving the world, okay? That's what Jimmy's doing. He's out saving the world, making the world a better place. That we know for sure. But look, we're going to be back here. We're going to be getting deep into the draft talk now. We didn't want to go too quick into it, because you go too quick into it, you got 38 mock drafts, your head is spinning, and you're tired of the draft before you get there. So we like to ease our way. We like to dip our toe in. We don't cannonball right to the deep end. No, we dip the tootsies in. We make sure the water's a good temperature. I'm not getting in there. Everything's gets a little tight. So I like to dip the tootsie in, make sure the temperature's right. And I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to break this draft down. We're going to continue talking free agency and all the whirlwind of news that's surrounding the NFL right now and today. We will be back in the not too distant future. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a good one. Bye.